This is an AE86 4AG swap nightmare that a buddy of mine asked me to help him out with. If you didn't see the other video, to make a long story short, he's the second owner of this car. Original owner is a family member, and then he paid a local shop here to do the GTS conversion, which is putting a 4AG engine in and making it, all work and everything. Unfortunately, the shop went out of business after he paid them in full to do the swap, and they obviously didn't get it done. So I am helping him get it sorted out. And today, I think what we need to do is disassemble a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be here or that's in the way for the GTS conversion, the 4AG swap. And then I think if we've got time, I'll try and get working on some of the wiring in here and figure out some of that stuff. We got the windshield washer tank and the coolant reservoir out. We got the SR5 clutch line out. We got some other just random bits and bobs that are in the way, SR5 stuff out of the way. We do have some parts here that I'm gonna run through. None of this is sponsored content, by the way. All these parts were purchased full retail, all that stuff, but we've got some radiator hoses and heater core hoses from HPS. I've used these over the years and I've been pretty happy with them, so that's what I had my friend order. Also, I may not be the biggest fan of a lot of Chase Bay's products, but sometimes they make something really simple and easy. So this is Chase Bay's GTS clutch line. Since the GTS 4AG bell housing puts the clutch on the opposite side of the transmission from the original SR5 setup, we have to extend the clutch line. I could have bent up a hard line, but really I prefer to do that with the engine out of the car. That way I can run it how I want to. But also, it's a really tight fit over by a clutch master cylinder. I don't think my tools can actually bend things that tight and flare it that tight. So Chase Bay's clutch line is what we're using. And one of the things I actually designed and 3D printed for this car is some wiring holders. These use the pretty standard Toyota bolt, and then they've got some little arms on either side, so that way you can put your harness right here and then throw a zip tie around it. So I decided to, I designed and 3D printed these to work with the AE86 stuff. I also learned who the original owner of this engine was, at least the previous owner, as well as the wiring, and why it's kind of set up the way it is. It's a buddy of mine who actually sold this to the shop that tried to do the swap, and he filled me on some of the details. So the wiring that is chopped right here was actually because the shop said, oh, we don't need that connector, you can go ahead and keep it. And my friend was trying to do he's doing an engine swap in his car, so he kept that, and then he didn't end up needing it. So he actually gave us that connector, so I should be able to set that back up, no problem. Also, he was telling me why he did the, this is for the cold start injector. He was manually controlling that because his car isn't actually an AE86. He has a previous generation Corolla, so having an AE86 plug-and-play wiring harness didn't make sense for him, and he made it work. Unfortunately, that means that some of the connectors that are hard to source unless you get a whole dash harness and everything with it, this engine harness has. So I'm just going to set up some of the wiring based on how he did it. It actually should be pretty straightforward, fingers crossed. I want it to work as close to factory as possible. So what I actually ended up doing was I dug through my tote of spare harnesses. And in that bucket of spare harnesses was this guy. This is actually a GTS dash harness that unfortunately got a little melty. This is what happens when you mix an early model and a late model harness, the body harness and the underdash harness. It actually changes a major power or ground and causes things to get melty. But what I need from this is not anything associated with that. This wiring right here is actually what I need. This is for the circuit opening relay, which controls the fuel pump, the cold start injector, and I think a few other things. And so now I should be able to use this wiring. I'm gonna have to strip it from this harness here. By stripping this out from this harness, I should be able to get everything to work in my buddy's car pretty close to like a stock turnkey setup. I'm trying not to use any switches or anything like that, anything additional. I just wanted to run off the key. Also, one of the things I pulled out that I thought was actually an SR5, a fuel filter, is not. It's an inline fuel pump that was bolted right here next to the GTS fuel filter. So I do have to wire that up, and I'm gonna have to rehook it up instead of removing them. I guess we're gonna just put it right back where it was, and that's what's gonna be providing fuel pressure for the engine. I think what I want to do now is work on this. This is the fuel line, and you hook it up to the fuel rail. So I have a new fitting to go on this, and that's, I think, what I'm gonna do now, and then we'll I think, take a stab at some of the wiring. All right, so here's where we're at with it. I loosely ran the alternator wiring here down and across and around. I'm not quite sure if I want to route it that way. I might change it. But then I was going to finish wrapping up the wiring for that. I realized I'm actually out of the right size wire, so I had to order some. And then I also went to go install that new Chase Base clutch line and realized that I'm also missing some bits for that. It doesn't, we need the GTS slave cylinders different for the SR5 versus the GTS, the 4AC versus 4AG. So we're gonna have to order that. And then I can finish wrapping that up, and I gotta wait for some wiring. So we'll come back another day and finish this up. After a long sleep on it, I'm back out here at the shop or the hangar working on the car, and I think I've got some of the wiring figured out. I pulled the circuit opening relay and one of the ECU connectors off of that spare harness I have, because they're kind of tied together, and then right here on my phone I've got the wiring diagrams open. All right, so a couple of pins I actually pulled from the harness. This one right here, which ties both of these together, the ECU and the circuit opening relay, is ignition power. So I know that that needs to go to key on power, and it's a big beefy wire with a big splice that goes to a bunch of stuff, so I need to make sure I provide a good source for that. Now, on the circuit opening relay, I also pulled out this wire with this female spade terminal. That female spade I pulled out of a connector, this guy, which goes to this major ground junction here on the junction block in the passenger kick panel. So that's going to go there. That goes to ground. We have this green wire from the circuit opening relay, plus there's 4 wires from this connector, these 4 from the ECU. These all go to the airflow meter. So I know that that all goes to the airflow meter. On the circuit opening relay, we have a couple more wires. The blue wire is actually the fuel pump power. So now I know that's going to go to the fuel pump. And then we have a black with white, and that should be another ground. On the ECU connector, we also have this red wire, and then there is one more wire that's kind of weird, blue wire. So we got a red and a blue, and let's make sure I know where those go. Okay, on the wiring diagrams, we got a red with white and a blue with white. That's the 2 wires, bat and speed. So the red with white gets power from like the stop lamp fuse, so that's kind of weird. And then the blue with white, that one goes to the instrument cluster, says speed sensor combination meter, and then goes to ground. So that one's going to go to the cluster. I got to figure out how to wire that one in, but this one at least I know is going to get power, and I'll look into how that works too. But that's pretty much it for this. Now I just got to figure out how to adapt it to the car. Okay, I think we'll get to that when we get to that. Now that I know that I have it figured out, I feel pretty good about it. The issue now is getting the main connector for the engine harness to the chassis harness. This is the kind of mess I'm left in. There's a couple of splices and connectors and heat shrink things. And then here's this connector. But also there's a diagnostic connector that goes in here too, and I don't know where that's wired at, so I'm going to go and try and separate out the diagnostic connectors, or the diagnostic wires, the ones that go to this main connector, and then I'll get these all spliced in and connected to the chassis harness. All right, I think we'll wrap this video up. We have the wiring figured out. I'm mostly done. The alternator wiring I ran right here. It's underneath the, gonna go underneath the radiator. I might tuck it underneath there, like even down further. I just don't want it to be the lowest thing in the car and risk scraping it and then, you know, big fire, big sparks, whatever. The engine connector, I have 99% done. These wires here are for air conditioning for the GTS, which is different, so we're not doing those. And I have one wire dangling out left here. That's going to be for the tachometer, but I need my ohm meter to make sure I'm hooking it up to the right wire here, because there's 2 that are the same color. We got this bundle of wires here, which I think goes to the actual diagnostic connector, but I couldn't quite figure out the wiring for that. The colors aren't quite matching up, but that's that. Plus, I have the circuit opening relay wiring figured out, but I still need a circuit opening relay. So we're gonna go ahead and order that, and then the next video, I'll go through that. The last little bits of the wiring here, make sure everything's tested out okay. I think we'll get the clutch done. We'll get all the hoses hooked up for the PCV system, the intake system, the brake booster, all that. Get the radiator put in. We'll do that next time, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll fire it up very, very soon. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.